Good evening and welcome to the August 8th, 2024 meeting of the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Ellen McKay.
Here.
Dave Hale.
Here.
Andrew Romerdahl.
Here.
Brian Flynn.
Here.
Travis Santo.
Here.
Brian Bennett.
Here.
Craig Bennett.
Here.
You have a quorum. Thank you.
Next item of business are the minutes, and there are minutes for Thursday, July 11th, 2024. May I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Flynn.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Mr. Flynn.
I'll second the motion.
We've
I
already
move
done
to
that.
approve.
Isn't
Second.
that- Okay. Are there any corrections, additions, deletions? Seeing none, is there any opposition to approval of the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved, and we'll move on to special order of business, disclosures. Are there any disclosures this evening? Mr. Hale.
I wasn't here for Resolution 2024-007 or 2024-008.
And will be
I'll be
abstaining.
abstaining from voting, yeah.
Mr. Romerdahl.
Yes, I was absent from Resolution 2024-004, 2024-005, and 2024-006, and as such will be abstaining from voting on said resolutions.
Anybody else? Okay, that makes it to me, and I was absent from Resolution 2024-004, 2024-005, and 2024-006, and will be abstaining from voting on those resolutions on the consent agenda. Okay, the consent agenda. May I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Flynn. Seconded by Mr. Hale. Does anyone wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Is there any opposition to approval of the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved and we move on. Nothing under appearance requests, nothing under unfinished business, nothing on the regular agenda, which brings us to public hearings. There's only one public hearing this evening, and it is a request for dimensional variances. And as a variance hearing, the procedure by which the public may speak to the board at this meeting is, after the staff presentation is completed on the public hearing item, the chair will ask for the applicant to state their case. The applicant, including all of his or her representatives, has 10 minutes for the presentation and may reserve time for rebuttal at the end of the public hearing. Throughout the proceedings, the burden of proof rests upon the applicant, who must convince the board by a preponderance of evidence that the variance should be granted. A concurring vote of a majority of the fully constituted membership of the board, minus those excused by conflicts of interest, shall be required to grant the variance. For a variance to be granted, all 8 standards must be substantially met. On the conclusion of the applicant's presentation, the board members and the staff may then direct questions to the applicant through the chair. The chair will then open the hearing to public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the rules of procedure. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., have 5 minutes, and individuals have 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the board. Time is kept by the secretary. The display in the front will be green to within 1 minute of the time allowed, then turn yellow. At this time, you should sum up your testimony, and at the end of the time allowed, the light will turn red and a tone will sound. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals takes. The parties have 30 days from the date of mailing or other distribution of the decision to file an appeal to Superior Court. So with that, first case is 2023-0065. Douglas Eby is the owner, and LaQuinta from Dowell is the representative. Are they here? Representatives here, okay. Will the staff please describe the notice given in this case?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On February 26, 2024, a total of 102 public hearing notices were mailed in accordance with the procedures of AMC 21-03-020H. Notice as of this writing, there is one public comment that has been received. The Sand Lake Community Council did not provide comments regarding this case.
Are there any objections to the sufficiency of notice in this case? Seeing none, will the staff please present the case?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Douglas Eby, the owner, is requesting dimensional variances from AMC 21-06-020A, Table 21.06-1, Table of Dimensional Standards, Residential Districts, to 1, allow a deck to encroach into the side setback 3.8 feet and the rear setback 5 feet, and 2, AMC 21-07-020B.11, to allow a deck to encroach into the water body setbacks 20 feet. This single-family home is located at 4558 Sandy Beach Drive. The property is 10,715 square feet, or approximately 1/4 of an acre, and is zoned R1, single-family residential. The surrounding properties to the north, east, west, and south are also all zoned R1. Sand Lake borders the property to the south at the rear. The property is characterized by a steep slope down to the lake located on the rear third of the lot. The home is located on the flatter portion of the property, closer to the street, at an elevation of approximately 114 feet. From the back of the home, the ground drops off from an elevation of approximately 107 feet to 88 feet elevation at the edge of Sand Lake. A building permit application was applied for on February 12, 2021, permit number R21-1111, by Precision Decks LLC for the construction of the new 4-level deck. This application was reviewed for compliance with current structural Title 23 and zoning Title 21 codes. After initial review, both structural and zoning required additional information to be provided to resolve comments. On March 25, 2022, updated plans and a new as-built were provided for another review for compliance with structural and zoning codes. This review also required additional information prior to issuance of a building permit. To date, the building permit that was applied for in 2021 has not been issued and is still open pending the requested information be provided. In order for the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals to approve the variance, the application must state with particularity the relief sought and must specify the facts or circumstances that are alleged to show that the application substantially meets the following 8 standards. Standard A, there exist exceptional or extraordinary physical circumstances of the subject property, including but not limited to streams, wetlands, or slope, and those circumstances are not applicable to other land in the same zoning district. Standard A is met for both variance 1 and 2. The subject parcel, according to the Municipality of Anchorage slope map, has a 25% slope over the whole parcel. This calculation does not account for the dramatic grade change along the south third of the parcel abutting Sand Lake. Therefore, this slope is an extraordinary physical circumstance to this property. This dramatic grade change, however, is comparable to the 4 lots to the west and 3 lots to the east of this parcel. Therefore, this slope circumstance is applicable to surrounding land in the same zoning district. Standard B, because of these physical circumstances, the strict application of this code creates an exceptional or undue hardship upon the property owner and would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of the zoning ordinance. Standard B is not met for both variance 1 and 2. The slope of this lot on the rear third is a physical circumstance, but strict application of the code does not create an undue hardship upon this property owner. The rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district were available to this property owner prior to remodeling the existing deck to a size that encroaches into 2 property setbacks and intensifies the encroachment into the water body setback. The removal or reduction of the footprint of the 4-level rear deck out of the side and rear and water body setbacks would create an exceptional or undue hardship for the property owner. Decks are a right commonly enjoyed by other properties in the R1 district, but are to remain outside of the setbacks. Standard C, the hardship is not self-imposed and special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant, and such conditions and circumstances do not merely constitute inconvenience. Standard C is not met for both variance 1 and 2. This hardship is self-imposed, and the conditions and circumstances are a result of the applicant. The current property owner acquired a non-conforming determination in September of 2023 after the deck was constructed. The non-conforming determination that was acquired states that September 17, 1985 MOA GIS aerial photo flight 5, frame 5, shows a large deck on the southeast side of this house. The deck from the 1985 aerial photo is the deck shown on the July 29, 2019 as-built, page 19 of your staff packet. The newly constructed deck shown in the September 2022 as-built increased the nonconformity and created 3 encroachments, also shown on page 19 and page 14 of your staff packet. The property owner applied for a building permit in February of 2021, permit number R211111. This permit was not issued, and there are still structural Title 23 and zoning Title 21 comments that need to be addressed. Title 21 requires any alterations to existing structures with non-conforming rights to decrease the nonconformity. Any additions to structures may not intensify the nonconformity. The comparison of as-built from 2019 and 2022 shows the extensive alterations to the existing structure have intensified the nonconformity and created additional encroachments. Standard D, the variance, if granted, will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property as permitted under this code. Standard D is not met for variance 1 and met for variance 2. This deck is currently adversely affecting the adjacent property to the east, 4522 Sandy Beach Drive. The increase in size and height of this deck has impacted the view shed looking southwest from the neighbor's property over Sand Lake. This can be found starting on page 120 of your staff packet. 2 property owners provided letters of support for this variance. The property owner to the west at 4572 Sandy Beach Drive, and the property owner just 1 house northeast of the adjacent property that is being adversely affected. There is currently a vacant lot between this property and 4572 Sandy Beach Drive. Standard E, the variance, if granted, does not change the character of the zoning district where the property is located, is in keeping with the intent of the code, and does not permit a use not otherwise permitted in the district in which the property lies. Standard E is met for both variance 1 and 2. The variance does not change the character of the zoning district. However, in keeping with the intent of the code, principal and accessory structures are to remain outside the setbacks. In addition, the intent of code regarding water body setbacks is to minimize encroachments to water-related accessory structures less than 500 square feet in size. Single-family residences with decks are permitted in the zoning district. Standard F, the variance, if granted, does not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the people of the municipality. Standard F is met for both variance 1 and 2. These encroachments within the side, rear, and water body setbacks have no known impacts on the health, safety, or welfare of the people of the municipality to date. Standard G, persons with disabilities are provided with access as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and reasonable accommodations. Standard G is met for both variances 1 and 2. This standard is not applicable to a single-family residence. Standard H, the variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible a reasonable use of the land. Standard H is not met for both variance 1 and 2. The minimum reasonable use of the land is possible without the need for a variance. The non-conforming determination that was acquired states that September 17, 1985 MOA GIS aerial photo flight 5, frame 5 shows a large deck on the southeast side of the house. The property owner applied for a building permit in February of 2021. This permit was not issued, and there are still zoning and structural comments that need to be addressed. Therefore, this deck addition resulted in creating an encroachment into the side and rear setback and intensifying the encroachment into the water body setback. It appears the nonconformity could have been maintained by code, allowing reasonable use of the land. Reviewing agency comments are included in attachment 3, starting on page 119 of your packet. There is 1 objection from the neighbor to the east and no objections to the encroachments from reviewing agencies. Regarding variance 1, to allow a deck to encroach into the side setback 3.8 feet and rear setback 5 feet, the department finds that standards B, C, D, and H are not met, and standards A, E, F, and G are met. Therefore, the department must recommend denial of the variances. If after a public hearing the board finds that all 8 standards are substantially met, then the approval should be subject to conditions 1 and 2 found on page 6 of your staff packet. Regarding variance 2, to allow a deck to encroach into the water body setbacks 20 feet, the department finds that standards B, C, and H are not met, and standards A, D, E, F, and G are met. Therefore, the department must recommend denial of the variance. If after a public hearing, the board finds that all 8 standards are substantially met, then the approval should be subject to conditions 3 and 4 found on page 6 of your staff packet. I can answer any questions that the board may have, and the petitioner and their representative are in attendance.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff by the board? Mr. Flynn?
I think I may have heard it wrong, but I just wanted to clarify. You said that the property to the east, did they file a grievance about this, or did they not file anything?
Their comments are on page 119 of your staff
119.
packet. It's Mr. Fell, and he's actually in attendance today too.
And,
But that's his write-up and his photos from his house.
okay, and that's at 4522?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Hale?
Thank you to the chair. Maybe I missed it, but what were the comments about zoning and structural that needed to be addressed but weren't?
Through the chair, Mr. Hale, if you turn to page 137, historical and supporting information, you will find the permit workup sheet and zoning review comments and structural comments. They are quite extensive. They go all the way to page they go to the end of your packet, 158.
That's right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I read this last time and it's been a month or two.
No worries.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question. If the determination had been made before the deck was rebuilt, would it have non-conforming rights?
Yes, Madam Chair. So had they done a non-conforming determination prior to 2021 when they asked for the permit, they could have rebuilt the existing deck to its exact dimensions. Is that what you were asking?
Yes, that's what I was
Yes, they
asking.
could have replaced like for like because it appeared to have existed prior to 1985 in zoning when it was required to be dimensioned.
Okay, thank you.
And prior to that, it didn't encroach into the rear setback or the side setback. It only encroached into the water body setback.
Thank you. Will the applicant or the applicant's representative please come forward? State your name and spell it for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Laquita Chmielowski, Chmielowski, and I am with Dell. I'm here representing the homeowner tonight for this variance.
Are there any questions of staff after their presentation?
No, I do not have any questions.
Okay. Then will you please present your case?
Sure. Oh, this is not working. Kate, will you advance the slides for me? Sorry, if you just hit the arrow key. Yeah, it's on.
Looks like it.
Oh, wait, hold on. There we go. Sorry. I have to be smarter than the clicker. Thank you. Oh, it's not. Can you advance? There we go. So the project's located on Lot 2A at the end of Sandy Beach Drive, and you can see it there outlined in red. Next slide, please. So as staff mentioned, the house was originally constructed in 1977. The deck was originally renovated in 1980, and from about 2000 to 2020, a lot of deferred maintenance happened. My client purchased the property in 2020 with the intent of aging in place, and at that time there was many renovations that needed to happen to the home, inside and exterior to the home. So just to make a clarification, we did do a non-conforming determination, but that really was specific to the northwest corner of the home to make sure that that encroachment due to a survey error was grandfathered in. So we understood that the deck as it exists today could not be grandfathered in. So a timeline, just a little bit of history on the permitting. So as staff mentioned, there was a permit submitted in February 2021. My client hired a contractor to help with the construction, permitting, and design of the deck. Construction started in April of 2021, and my client thought that all the permits were in hand, everything was great, they were moving forward. He became aware in May of that year that there was not a permit issued, and so all work ceased at that point to try to resolve getting the variance, and that came to light as the review comments came in from the city indicating that there were encroachments. So in 2022, they hired Dell to start this variance process. So there are portions of the deck that are unfinished since all work was stopped since that time. So as staff mentioned, we're asking for 3 variances for the side yard, rear yard, and water body setback. Next slide. So this is just, you have this in your packet, just an example of what was originally there. So the house, when you enter on the street level, you're actually up on the upper story of the home, which is the main living space. And then the lower level of the home sits down below. And so the original deck gave access to the main living space and then the lower level. And then the only access to the backyard and the lake was from this long set of stairs down a 2-to-1 slope. And then, of course, this is the as-built of the deck as it exists today, showing the setbacks. So when the property owner started this project, they had several things in mind, one of which was they bought this home to age in place. And so the renovations that were done interior to the home included an elevator so they can access the different levels of the home. And then when they went to look at the deck, that was also kept in mind. So as you age in place and you lose mobility, the idea is to provide ways to have better access. And so that long staircase that goes down the 2-to-1 slope would be very difficult for someone to use to access the backyard and the lake as they lose mobility. So the deck was designed with multiple tiers with shorter staircases, which is more ideal for people with limited or little to no mobility. They also were looking at how much they could improve the vegetation along the lake as well as retain what's already there. And so they actually took out a larger dock that was at the lake, let that grow back with natural vegetation. They also put an extensive gutter system underneath the deck to direct stormwater away from the lake and so it wouldn't erode that area. And we actually brought the watershed folks out from the municipality for a site visit so they could see this, and they have no comments or objections to the encroachments, and part of that I think was that they were impressed with all the things that were done to try to improve the water body and be responsible in what was completed here. Next slide. So this is just a quick picture of the original deck. It was in disrepair. There were actually portions of the deck on top where you could step through. You can see it was just on concrete piers support, so it definitely had to be replaced. So staff has indicated that we haven't met all the approval criteria. The first one was B. So one of the interesting things is encroachments are allowed for decks in the rear and side yard setback if you can be no more than 30 inches above grade. Because we're dealing with a slope that essentially goes down to the edge of the lake, it's impossible to build a deck that maintains the 30 inches. So if we had flat ground, we could meet that criteria and we would not be asking for that variance. But in this case, due to the physical features, we can't. Also, we were keeping accessibility to the lake in mind, and so we have that tiered approach to get down to the lake. Next slide. So this is in your packet as well. I understand that the adjacent neighbors have a similar situation as far as slope, but as you can see, this is actually, when you look at the mean slope of all the properties around the lake, this is one of the steepest, and the only other property that's similar is actually longer in length, so you have more space to work with when you're dealing with slopes. And then this is a topographic map that kind of shows, you can see the house, so that those steep slopes kind of start at the middle of the house and go down towards the lake, and those slopes are 2-to-1. So to give you kind of a reference, accessible pathways are no more than 5%. Accessible ramps are a little over 8%. This is at almost 50% slope. And then this is just a representation of what is constructed. So that deck 1 is at the main living area. Deck 2 is at the lower level of the house. Both of these are accessible from inside the home using the elevator. And then approval criteria C for a hardship not self-imposed. I think we all recognize I'd rather be standing here prior to the deck being built to ask for this variance, but it wouldn't change the need for the variance to be able to allow the applicant to age in place. And then the concerns about the impacts on the views to the neighbors. So this is looking back. My client's house is on, I guess it's on the left there, and then the neighbor's house is on the right. So their primary views are out towards the lake. And I think the concerns are about the upper story window that faces the neighbor, the neighbor's upper story window, as well as the portion of their deck and living room window that face the neighbor, or face my client's home. So we actually, my clients had ongoing discussions with the neighbor trying to find some resolution, assuming that a variance is granted. And so we met with them about a month ago to talk about their concerns. And so one of the concerns is the upper story bathroom. And you can see there's a large row of trees that kind of block the view or help screen the view between the two properties. In the summertime, they trim those trees to make sure that the neighbor is able to keep views towards this way, the client's home. But they actually had an agreement to let the trees grow up to block that upper bathroom window. And then when we were on site, there were also discussions about potentially screening and moving some railing on level 2 to make sure that you couldn't see back and forth between the two properties. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Flynn?
Hi, so the agreement between the two neighbors, is this in writing?
My client, as far as what was agreed upon that day when we were there, he was prepared to put it in writing, and I think the neighbors still had some concerns, so it hasn't gone forward in writing. But he's still prepared to do that.
Okay, but this is still a work in progress between the two neighbors?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hale?
Thank you. So the deck grew in size, and I guess what I'm wondering is, with this new design for access and everything, was it possible to keep it the same size, or was it not because of the way you had to do the stairs?
Yeah, I think that it would have been difficult to keep it the same size because that original deck really didn't have access. It was up at the bottom level of the house, which is still several feet above the backyard, and it just had that long single staircase that goes down the embankment.
Mr. Flynn?
So you had stated earlier that they had stalled construction of the deck, so it's not completed?
Correct.
Okay. So the question I have is, what portion, or is there a portion of the deck that can be either removed or scaled back to conform a little bit more? Where I'm talking more about is in 20-foot setback in the water. Is there any way to do that and still have the enjoyment that they're looking for?
Yeah, I think the difficulty is that each of those levels of the deck are constructed, so it's not a simple solution to just chop off a portion. The side yard setback where the stair landing projects into the setback, that corner could be removed, but as far as the water body setback, the way it's constructed and all that work is complete, it's not a straightforward solution.
Okay, and it's based on the slope of the back lot?
Yes.
Of course, okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes,
Brian
please.
Bennett?
Yes, please. I have a question for the staff, actually. There's been words tossed around about exceptional, extraordinary, undue, reasonable, and now we've introduced the word difficult. I'd like some comment, please, on distinguishing between those words in use in the variance.
I think that this whole discussion should happen after we finish with the petitioner.
Fair
There'll
enough.
be a time for you to
Fair
ask
enough.
questions of the staff. Do you have any questions for,
No, I do not have any questions for the
okay,
presenter.
anybody else? Mr. Bennett. Yeah, I know, but Craig? Craig Bennett. There's two Bennetts. It's hard.
I do have one question for you. There's a lot of structural comments I see that have been resolved. Is the deck currently built, I guess, safe? And how would these get resolved moving forward?
Yeah, so I'm not a structural engineer, so I can't speak to if it's safe. It's functioning and it's constructed. My client's prepared to re-engage the engineer to resolve the comments and get this permit closed out. He just was waiting to get through this variance process.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I have a couple of questions. So the building permit hasn't been issued yet, and yet the construction proceeded, and who decided that?
I have the homeowner here, so I'm gonna start the answer and I'll let him chime in. But my understanding is that the homeowner hired the contractor and began construction. The homeowner was under the assumption that any permits that were needed were acquired. And it came to light later to the homeowner that they hadn't been acquired.
Okay, and the replacement permit as opposed to new construction, that was also the contractor's decision?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Anybody else? Are there any questions of the applicant by the staff?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public wishing to testify? If so, please come forward. You have to turn on the mic. Okay, there. And would you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is William Fell, and I represent myself and my wife Miriam S. Fell, with the house just to the left of Evie's. The two homes were constructed about the same time. They were designed by an architect, Carlin Williams, so that no windows would look at each other. No one would block another view. So for 40 years, we had that. And then Ames became debilitated, and Doug came in and bought the home. And of course, he had renovations to do. An elevator was already in the house because Mrs. Luce had MS. He began the renovations, and then he started doing some deck work. And one of the decks, the upper one that came off of his kitchen, it looked in our bathroom window. And I commented to him, I said, "You're looking right at us." When I'm standing there tinkling. And my wife takes a shower, you're looking right in it. So we cut a piece of cardboard so we can put it up there. We did discuss trees and to let them grow so that it would block to some degree. But in his process of getting his ground level architecture or landscaping done, his crew was tearing out the roots of this spruce tree. And I said, that's one of the trees that blocks it. And he said, well, that's what's got to be done. And so anyhow, correspondingly, the tree is not looking super healthy. And the other trees, they're deciduous. So 7 months out of the year, we have no leaves blocking the view. And I just have to show you this. Hang on here. Won't take a second. You can just pass it on down into the Grant Secretary here. This is what you see 7 months out of the year, the structure of the deck right in our window. We had, a view of the lake and the surrounding trees all the way to the horizon during winter. And now with that deck, we have people looking in. So we have to, when they get out on the deck, they look right in at our 50 feet away, looking right at our dining room. So we have to keep the curtains closed all the time. So, I mean, that apparently is not something I have a right to say that you blocked my view. But the fact that he did all this without a permit and then enters into the water or into the forward motion, if he would have built it back where the original deck was, in the two little pictures I had sent previously, there was a Google Earth picture of the house before any decks were changed, and you can actually see the size, which you already saw it up there. You saw the size of the original deck, and then I had a little guy with one of those drones take a picture in the winter when there was no foliage on, and you can see, you can see where the water line is, and you can see how the deck protrudes out into it. So all I'm asking, if there's some way that this process could give me back some of my privacy, that would be really nice. I guess I'm over time. Any other questions you might have of me?
Any questions by the board members? Mr. Flynn.
Good evening. Just a question. So what would you be looking for from them? Would it be natural growth between your two properties, or are you looking for some sort of a visible screening on their side?
Well, what I'd like is the deck brought back so it's not in our window.
Okay.
Because if I put a tree up there, it still doesn't give me the view I once had. And if they are allowed to do this, it doesn't seem right to enter that water barrier that we're all around the lake have built with that in mind, that there's a setback. We don't build to the water or on the water so the neighbors can see. I mean, 2 out of every 3 people, if this variance goes, could be having their view blocked because one person would build a gazebo out there or a boathouse, and then your house is set back, so now you can't see the lake. Because it's, right now, if you look at Sand Lake, all the places except where Doug is basically have a view like this. When Doug's there, if we all put gazebos out there, then we'd have a view like this. So I'm just saying it just doesn't seem right when there's been a standard of construction, and then I'm sure if he'd have gone through the permitting, I wouldn't be standing here. But he just went ahead and built anyhow, and now is asking to be forgiven. I mean, it doesn't seem right. Break the law and then you're forgiven. Don't make sense. They wouldn't let me do that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Thank you for your time.
Hey, thanks for your time.
Anyone else from the public wishing to testify?
How you doing? My name's Ron Thompson, Ronthompson. I was the one trying to work with Laquita, broker a deal. We went over there trying to walk through and take a look at it. I think we got close. We got closer than where we were. Part of it was moving the 8-foot glass guardrail. He's got not only the decks, he's got big 8-foot guardrails on top of it, glass to block the wind. I mean, it's really nicely done. I think you asked the question, was it unsafe? I don't think it's unsafe at this time, except for a couple places where you could fall through. But structurally wise, it's basically been done. But I did want to mention, there was a stop work issue. There was more than just, oh, go file a permit, and then, the muni stop worked it. That's why it got stopped in its tracks, because it got found. I look for, one of the things that I look for, and I'm in Anchorage, I bought a lake. I bought a lake off of Tudor Road. This very issue intrigues me because I'm getting ready to design a development on a lake that I bought the entire lake and own all the land around it. And I'd like to have that same opportunity if that's the case. So I look for consistency in what we do. And in this case, I would look for a consistent, and that's what I usually look for, is consistency. It's a little odd to see a request for water body setbacks so large. I mean, almost 80% or even 100%. It almost looks like 100% rather than the 20. It almost looks like it is the full 25. But at the end of the day, I mean, if one gets it, then the next person gets it, and then pretty soon we don't have a setback in the water body and we're built all up to the lake. But sure, I'd probably love to do that on my entire lake that I own and put all the properties up there like that. So I hope you think about that when it comes to that issue of being consistent, because that's what we do, that's what the code says. And I think if you do the aerials around Anchorage for most water body setbacks, they're all in place. You don't see, I don't know if in any of the pictures I looked at, if I saw such a building in that 25 feet. So I think that's what I would look for, is a consistency and making sure. That's why I was intrigued with this a little bit, is because I do have a property. It's got elevated banks on it, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And doing it with water catch systems, I mean, yeah, that's one way to do it, but I just don't know if that's the best thing that we can do for our water bodies that are kind of trying to be protected. So at the end of the day, it's up to you guys to decide, but I just wanted to point out that we were, and we will continue, if you guys grant it, to continue to try to work with them to come up with something that works together between the owners. But anyway, just wanted to tell you that we have been trying to work something out.
Are there any questions by the board for Mr. Thompson? Mr. Flynn?
Hi, Ron. So in the working between the two of you as negotiating for both parties, how close have you come? You said there was a kind of a setback in those negotiations, but how close would you gather you were before those stalled?
I thought we had one, which was moving quite a bit of the large 8-foot guard. There's a big point on the front, the large one that goes out, and we were bringing that back to where it was, right to the stairwell over to the side. We kind of worked that out, but I think the parties both didn't really want to put it in writing until after this decision, because, I mean, it makes sense, right? The owner would want to get it all and not do it. If he can't do it, then he'd go to this, and the owner next door would rather have him move it back. But so it's kind of like one of those things. I think it might have been just a little bit ahead, but we did try. I thought Laquita and I were working together, trying to come up with the best solution to make it work. Because, we understand the situation. We both didn't want to go in and butt heads. We wanted to try to see if we could get there. I think we came close, but I don't know if the two bodies are really in agreement. I think it's really they're waiting on your decision, and then they'll kind of live with that decision.
Okay. Laquita, you consent to that? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else from the public wishing to testify? One shot.
Hello, I'm Stephen Callahan. It's Tevencallaghan. I did the survey on page 42. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to ask them. I don't want to use anyone else's time.
Well, you have 3 minutes, so
I don't have
by
anything.
yourself.
Yeah, I don't have anything really to say, so unless you have questions. I mean, it's a fine-looking deck. I did the survey in 2022. Not sure what's happened since then, but.
Any
that's all.
questions for the surveyor? Guess not. Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to testify? Oh. Didn't he already talk? Did he? No, he didn't, I guess.
Yeah, I'm Jack Duclos.
Wait, hang on.
What's that? Okay.
Okay, go.
Oh, yeah, my name is Jack Duclos, last name Duclos, and just wanted to relate for my father-in-law, Bill Fell, that there was a phone call after the negotiations, and that after they were trying to work on agreement, but that he didn't want to agree to anything that they talked about. So I want relaying that message that you can't come back up here. So he didn't want to compromise, or he wanted to, I guess go with your decision, over coming to a solution. I think I said that correctly.
Any questions by the board?
Yeah.
No? Thank you.
But yeah, he doesn't want to compromise at all from the initial, any talks that they had with Mr. Evie.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify? Does the staff have any rebuttal?
The only thing I wanted to clarify is if you turn to page 140 of your staff packet, 137 of your staff packet, there actually was a variance granted for the corner of the house. Laquita pointed out that that was part of the reason it never was recorded though. It was applied for and granted, but it was never recorded against the property for the garage and a fence. That 4.4 feet from the west property line. That's the only thing I had, Madam Chair.
But not recorded.
Correct. So granted, just so if you don't, it could still have been it could still be recorded today. It was granted. There's not really a variance goes with the property. It just never was recorded against the property. So it doesn't show up in a DNR record search, title search.
Thank you. Does the applicant have any rebuttal?
Yeah. So I guess just to reiterate, my client, Mr. Ebby, is willing to move forward with the compromises that were discussed with the neighbor, which included allowing the trees to continue to grow to block that upper deck. And also, just to clarify on that, the original deck had a deck that you could walk out on in that same area that had the same view. And then there were discussions about putting up some screening elements on the lower, deck level 2, and also moving, as Ron indicated, moving the glass railing back. So he is still willing to do that as a compromise to help buffer those views even more. So that is still on the table, and we understand the neighbor's concerns, and that's why he's continued the conversation and why we met on site, trying to find a resolution. And with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions. Oh, and I guess the only other thing I will add too is that as far as the water body setback, if this was a viewing platform, those are allowed. And so although this is a deck, it does provide views of the lake and the ability for the applicant to enjoy his backyard. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Any additional questions? Thank you. Okay, public hearing is closed, and the matter rests with the board. May I have a positive motion, please, on the first variance, the one for the setback, the side and rear setback. Mr. Hale.
I move in case 2023-0065 to approve a variance from AMC 21.06-020A, Table 2106-1, Table of Dimensional Standards, Residential District, to allow a deck to encroach 3.8 feet into the side setback, 5 feet into the rear setback, subject to the conditions shown on page 6 of the staff report.
Seconded by Mr. Flynn. It has been moved and seconded to grant a variance to allow a deck to encroach 3.8 feet into the side setback and 5 feet into the rear setback. Mr. Hale, will you please speak to the motion?
Thank you, through the chair. This case has a lot of distractions, but I think that I keep coming back to the code and how the community is living currently with that code. And it's true that if everyone starts just kind of doing their own thing, you know, what's the point of a code? So, I mean, everybody's got steep slopes, everybody wants to have decks, everybody wants to build big boathouses, but it's damaging to the community if everybody just does that and we give variances away to everybody even though it's in conflict with the code. So to me, there has to be some pretty substantial reasons to give a variance, and I'm not seeing it. I agree with staff at the moment.
Mr. Flynn.
I would also agree that there's, there's a lot of standards that, this has been a bit difficult one. I know we've looked at this one for several months now and had several delays. And in looking at it, every time I come back to it, I come up with a different question, a different angle or a thought on it. But I think that ultimately when it comes down to it, there's the standards of Title 21 are there, and they're not only there to protect the property owner, but they're there to protect the neighborhood as well. And I guess that from my standpoint, I actually do agree with staff on this motion. So.
Is there any further discussion? Any other board member have something to say? Okay, are you ready for the question? The question is on the adoption of the motion to grant a variance to allow the deck to encroach 3.8 feet into the side setback and 5 feet into the rear setback. A yes vote will grant the variance, a no vote will deny the variance. Please vote. There is 1 vote in the affirmative and 6 votes in the negative, so the variance has been denied. And we'll go to the second variance, the one about the water body. Could I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Hale.
Thank you, through the chair. I move in case 2023-0065 to approve a variance from AMC 21.07.020B.11 to allow a deck to encroach 20 feet into the water body setback, subject to the conditions shown on page 6 of the staff report.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Brian Bennett. Mr. Hale, would you speak to the motion, please?
My opinion on this is about the same as the last one. I think Title 21 is there for a reason, and we need to stick with it as much as possible. And so I agree with staff.
Mr. Brian Bennett?
I really have nothing much to add, except that I do concur with the staff reporting on this.
Okay. Are you ready for the question? The question is on the adoption of a motion to grant, to allow a deck to encroach 20 feet into the water body setback. A yes vote will grant the variance, a no vote will deny the variance. Please vote. Where's the yes vote? Oh, I see. Never mind. 7 votes in the negative, no votes in the positive. So the variance has been denied. Okay, so that's the end of the public hearings. Reports are next. I do not have a report. Secretary says there isn't a meeting, right? No September meeting. There's no committees. Board member comments. I have a comment. It's nice to see everybody. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Brian Bennett moves. Mr. Hale seconds. We are adjourned.